I used to love going out on night drives. That is until I started working the night shift. It was basically stuck driving the same route at the same time every night. It wasn't the routine itself that bothered me. It was all of the unsettling things that happened to me on that road. The worst of which, though, was when I realized that someone was following me home. It started about 2 weeks after I began working the night shift. I was on my way home from work, and the roads were desolate as usual. The music in my car was blaring as I pulled up to one of the few intersections on my ride home, and I saw that the light was red, so I came to a stop and waited. I sat at the light for a few seconds, just casually looking ahead, but when I glanced into the rearview mirror, any feeling of calmness that I had quickly went away. I practically jumped out of my seat as I noticed someone standing in the middle of the road directly behind my car. I couldn't make out their face because they had a hood over their head, but they were staring right at me. I could feel my chest pounding as I kept my eyes locked on the figure in the mirror. The strangest thing was, they weren't moving at all. Even though I couldn't see them, I knew that their eyes were looking right at me. That's why as soon as I saw the light turn green in my peripheral vision, I punched it. I got back to my house as fast as I could and did everything I could to shake the uncomfortable feeling. By the next day, I had basically forgotten about the whole incident. At least I forgot about it until I was on my way home. As I approached the light that I stopped at the night before, my heart began to pound as I saw it turn red. I knew I would have to stop. For some reason, I feared that the person would be back. Every second that I sat still in the middle of the empty road felt like an hour. But eventually the light turned green, and I was relieved to not see anyone. I continued to drive toward my house, only to reach another intersection that required me to stop. By this point, I wasn't even thinking about the person who had scared me the night before, but I wish I had been. I couldn't help but scream as I looked over at my rearview mirror, only to see the same figure from the night before standing right outside of my car. This time, though, they weren't standing as still as before. Instead, it was almost like they were swaying a little bit. I couldn't bear to wait around, and instead of hoping that the light would turn green, I decided to run through the red light. Something wasn't right about that person, and I don't understand how or why they were at a different intersection this time. The next day I knew that I had to work the night shift again, and I couldn't call out because I needed the money for rent. I didn't go in without a plan though. You see, I knew a different route to my house that would take an extra 10 minutes or so, but it would bring me past all the intersections that I had seen the man in, and it made me feel much more comfortable. My shift ended and I started heading down the alternate route that I picked out, and was relieved to see that there weren't as many intersections to deal with. The only one that I actually came up on was the intersection that was about 2 minutes from my house, and this time I wouldn't be going through it in the same direction that I had been a few nights prior. Still, I couldn't help but feel anxious as I pulled up to the light, which happened to be red and forced me to stop again. I sat at the intersection and fidgeted with my hands on the steering wheel as I kept glancing into my rearview mirror, wondering if I was going to see anyone. There was no one behind me this time, but that doesn't mean I was alone. I couldn't believe my eyes as I looked toward the side of the street that I would normally drive down to get home from work, and I noticed a man standing by the side of the road. He was clearly facing me, and something in my gut told me that it was the same figure I had seen 2 nights before. He was waiting for me. I kept my eyes fixated on him as I pulled my phone out of my pocket and called the police. The phone started to ring, and just as it did, I noticed that the figure had taken a step forward and was now standing in the middle of the street. And this time I could see something silver shining in his hand. "Hello, 911, what's your emergency?" said a female voice on the other side of the phone. "Help, please. I'm at the intersection in front of my house, and there's a man standing in the road with a knife," I said as calmly as possible. I told the operator what intersection I was at and then slowly started to back my car up so that I was further away from the man. To my surprise, he wasn't moving at all or trying to walk toward me. Instead, he was just standing in the road, staring over at my car. I waited there in absolute terror until the police arrived, and as soon as they did, the man tried to run away. The police officers managed to catch him, though, and arrested him for multiple violations, including being a felon in possession of a deadly weapon. When the police questioned him and took the case to court, it was never revealed why he was following me home or why he had the knife. but the only thing that we found out was that he had been arrested in the past for stalking and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. I don't know what could have happened to me if he had managed to somehow find my house. I was on my way home from a festival that was only a few hours away from my house, and I decided to leave the night before it ended so that I could beat all the traffic. That turned out to be one of the scariest decisions of my life. As I was driving my old Volkswagen down the side roads, I decided to pull over so that I could use the bathroom. As I was walking back to the car, though, I started hearing noises coming from the woods around me. I stopped in my tracks and looked around me for a second, but when I didn't see anything, I just kept walking back to my car. I turned the key in the ignition and started up the car, but when my headlights turned on, I was absolutely shocked by the amount of eyes reflecting back at me. The light from my headlights was shining at the road in front of me, but as some of it broke off toward the tree line, I could see the reflections of at least a dozen animals' eyes looking right at me. At first, I thought that it was one of the coolest things I had ever seen, but that was until I heard the sound of something crackling behind my car. I looked in the driver's side mirror and walking around my car and onto the road saw a large animal that I couldn't quite make out. It had dark fur and walked on all fours, making me suspect that it was either a really small bear or a wolf of some kind. I didn't take the time to examine the animal though, as something in my gut told me to get out of there as quickly as possible. I stepped on the gas and started making my way down the road, being sure not to hit the animal that was walking beside the car. I drove for about 2 or 3 minutes and figured that I was far enough away from the animals to relax a bit. But just as I went to turn the radio on, I heard the horrible sound of the engine beginning to sputter. My car was dying. I tried to push it as far as it would go, but eventually it came to a complete stop. I got my phone and called AAA and requested a tow and a ride home, but they informed me that it would be at least 20 minutes. I told them that was fine, gave them my phone number, and then proceeded to wait. That was when I noticed them, though. As soon as I hung up the phone and looked back up toward the windshield, I could see that I was once again surrounded by a wall of glowing eyes that were lining the tree line. I tried my best to stay calm, but within a few seconds of realizing that I was surrounded by unknown animals, I heard the same sort of crackling as before. I realized now that the noise I was hearing was the large animal walking alongside my car. Their nails must have been scratching on the asphalt. I knew that I couldn't run away this time, and as the dark-furred creature got closer to my driver's side window, all I could do was hold my breath. I locked eyes with it as it stopped outside of the window and simply stared at me. There was no arguing what it was anymore, and I don't think I'll ever be that close to a wolf again in my life. I could hear a low guttural sound growl through the closed window, and I had no idea what I was supposed to do in that situation. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my cool, but out of the side of my eyes, I started to see more and more of the fur-covered animals stepping into the road, all of which were looking right at me. It's like they could sense my heart racing and knew that I would be easy prey. The growling started to get louder, and it took everything that I had in me not to scream. The big wolf that was closest to me started to lower their stance, and something told me that he was about to lunge at the car. Thankfully, though, he didn't get the chance. Just as I was about to close my eyes in fear, I saw the headlights of another car driving in from the opposite direction. I knew it couldn't have been my tow truck, but either way, as soon as the animals saw the headlights, they scattered back into the woods that surrounded me. The oncoming car must have seen them, though, because he slowed down and pulled up alongside me to ask if I was okay. I explained what happened, and he thankfully waited with me until the tow truck got to me. Needless to say, we both stayed in our respective cars, though. That is hands down the most scared I have ever been by myself in a car at night. It was around 1 in the morning, and I was headed back to the house after seeing a late-night movie. I remember being annoyed when I got out of the theater because it wasn't raining before the movie started, but by the time it was over, it was pouring outside. I got to my car as fast as I could and started my drive home. I decided to take the back roads to my house because I didn't feel comfortable with my tires on the wet highway. They were too bald for me to trust it. The roads were empty at first, so that was cool, but it wasn't long before I saw headlights coming up to me in my rearview mirror. I started to speed up a little so that I could at least match the speed limit now that there was someone behind me, but at the rate they caught up to me, I figured they were just going to pass. I was wrong though, and tension started to build in the air around me as I realized just how close the car behind me was to mine. I could hardly see the headlights anymore, though they were still blaring. I pushed down on the gas a little more to hopefully put at least a foot or two of space between me and the car behind me, but every time I sped up, they matched me. I held onto the steering wheel as tight as I could as I maneuvered my way through the turns, but the rain was making it very hard to stay in my lane. As soon as we hit a straightaway though, I decided to open my window and put my hand out of it to signal for the other driver to just pass me, but they didn't acknowledge it. That was when I felt my car suddenly jerk forward a little bit. He had just hit me. It was just a little tap, but still, I had no idea what this person wanted or why they were being so aggressive. I sped up a bit more. This time I was able to get away from the car for a second, but they wasted no time catching up. I could feel my heart starting to race, and I couldn't think clearly as I struggled to figure out what I should do. I continued driving as the car behind me chased me through the rain for what felt like no reason. Every time I took a turn, I was almost certain that my tires would lose traction, and I would go off the side of the road, but somehow they managed to hang on. The only sound I could focus on as I drove was the noise of the windshield wipers quickly moving back and forth, but even with them on full blast, I could only see a few feet in front of me. After a minute or so of driving nearly 30 miles per hour over the speed limit, I noticed that the car chasing me was getting closer again. I braced myself as I thought that they were going to hit me again. The headlights got so close to my car that I could no longer see them in my rearview mirror. The moment of impact could have been at any second. So you can imagine my surprise when out of nowhere, the car seemed to disappear. It was like their headlights turned off and they just stopped in the middle of the road because they were nowhere to be seen in my rearview mirror. I was still shaken up though, so I continued to drive at a high speed for a few minutes before getting calm enough to slow down. By that point, I was only a few minutes away from my house, so I figured everything would be okay. But I couldn't keep my heart from rising again when I noticed a faint light in my rearview mirror. As the lights got closer, I realized that they were headlights, and right away my mind went back to the car that was harassing me just moments before. I held my breath as the car behind me approached faster and faster. However, I was able to breathe again when I realized that it was a truck behind me this time. There was no way that it was the same car as before, and I made it back to my house just fine. To this day, I don't know where that car came from, what it wanted, or more importantly, where it went. And honestly, it was so hard to focus on everything in the rain. The entire incident seemed crazy. Nothing like that had ever happened to me before, and it hasn't happened since.